Hey guys, welcome back to the depth chart. It's Mazin here, and before I start the video, I just want to apologize. I haven't uploaded in a very long time because I've been in the middle of a move and graduation, but I'm back and better than ever. And I've got something that's pretty worth the wait. Over the past week and a half or so, I built a running back model for the first time that uses 10 plus indicators and 5 years of data. We're using snap share, opportunity rate, offensive line efficiency, target share, and so many more things that we're going to get into later in this video. I made this model from scratch, and I really want to show you guys. And this is something that is perfect for our next Behind the Box Score episode. So let's get straight into it. Now, before we get into any players, I want to show you guys my indicator weight distribution for each of the statistics we're going to use today. So how much each factor pretty much contributes to the 100-point model total. The first up for 15% is the weighted opportunities per snap share. A weighted opportunity is basically the opportunity that a running back gets in fantasy points. So half a weighted opportunity is a rushing attempt, and a reception could be a full weighted opportunity because that gets you more points. And depending on the weighted opportunities a player has per snap share, shows you how much a team values that player and how much they're going to give them that ball. Next up, we have role clarity, and this is kind of subjective, but it's extremely important. If a player has a clear RB1 role going into the season, or a coach speaks good about a player going into the season and the off season, or we have past evidence of showing good role clarity for a player, then that usually shows predictive measures for players. For example, Jonathan Taylor this year, many people drafted him late round 2, but he had a clear RB1 role and just needed the opportunity to shine without the injuries. People weren't really banking on him getting that much opportunity, but Jonathan Taylor ended up getting that opportunity because he was always the RB1. People just forgot that he's always injured. Next up, we have 4 that are tied for 10%. That's age curve, receiving ability, O-line quality, and red zone usage. For the age curve, most running backs under the age of 28 and 29 are running backs that succeed, and most running backs that are over that age range usually have a steep decline, barring Derrick Henry, but we'll get into him later. Receiving role. Fantasy points in PPR leagues come from receiving at the end of the day. A lot of it does. So if you're just getting pure rush attempts, a lot of your points are going to mainly come from touchdowns, which is kind of volatile when it comes to fantasy. O-line quality, you got to have a good O-line to have production. We saw last year Ashton Jeanty completely not his problem that he did not have good production. His O-line was just so terrible. This year he gets an updated O-line, and we'll get into that later. Red zone usage. At the end of the day, if you're getting red zone carries, you're going to get touchdowns. Touchdowns equals points. Pretty simple as that. For the next 2 we have tied up at 8% is OC scheme fit and a mobile quarterback risk. So is your offensive coordinator have a good scheme for you, or is your offensive coordinator not going to get the best of your abilities? Something we can look into for the next upcoming year is Devon Achane. While I don't think the OC scheme fit is terrible, Mike McDaniel, had one of the best scheme fits for every single running back. Achane was extremely productive with McDaniel, and I think that production will drop off. We'll get into that later. Mobile quarterback risk. If you have a mobile quarterback, most of the time teams are going to scheme the quarterback to try and get touchdowns near the red zone, or they're just going to take rushing attempts purely because they are a mobile quarterback, and that's what happens. So if you have a less mobile quarterback, then they are more likely to take a bit less of that risk. Next up, we have yards after contact at 7%. That's skill. Yards after contact is just a good predictor of kind of like a skill level. If running backs have good yards after contact, usually you can get pretty good production out of them, and it's usually a good predictive measure. Because if a running back has good yards after contact, but maybe he didn't produce as well, but the next season he has a much better situation, maybe a better O-line, maybe a better offensive coordinator, maybe that could be a sign that he has much more production in the future. And both tied for last at 5% is year-over-year stability and injury. Year-over-year stability is just like, has this running back proved anything? Has this running back had any past production? Or have they shown at least any type of flash? And then the injury health is pretty self-explanatory. Is this running back extremely injury-prone? Is this running back having injuries going to hinder their performances later on? And something to note for the injury health one is kind of interesting because I like to weigh injuries a little bit more, but most predictors actually don't use injury as a huge predictor because it's not very good for sustained success. But those are the indicator weight distributions for everything, so you can understand how the model weighs each player to get into the rankings. Now, I know these two running backs are extremely obvious. They are respectively the number 1 and number 2 drafted players at consensus currently on most sites. But we have to talk about them because the data is unbelievable. This is generational data from both Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson. If we can see from this running back profile comparison here, we see Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan compared to the next 3 running backs, spoiler, from the model: Omarion Hampton, Jonathan Taylor, and James Cook. Look at how much better Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson is compared to their competition. These guys are easily the 1A and 1B of fantasy. I'm always looking for reasons to not take the number 1 player consensus because in the past, sometimes the number 1 player consensus underperforms because of the high expectation. But both of these guys should easily be the number 1 and number 2 running back in fantasy next year, barring any injury. The stats back it up. Everything backs it up. As you can see from the comparison here, when we use the weighted model data, look at Jahmyr Gibbs. He's at the top for workload, role, receiving. He has good red zone. His red zone usage increased every year. His O-line got better. His elusiveness is at the top. He has the perfect age. And his health, he's never been injured, basically. Bijan Robinson is basically the same. We're only a little bit worried about Brian Robinson coming in. The model takes that into account. So his workload is a little bit down. His red zone is a tiny bit down. But at the end of the day, Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs are generational. I had to talk about them. We're going to look into these next couple graphs, and you're going to see them throughout the video. But we can't talk all about them because we already know how good they are. Now, I want to talk about who the model and I think is the most undervalued player going in the top 20 running backs. And that's Omarion Hampton. Omarion Hampton right now is going as the RB11 on ESPN and is being picked in around round 2. And if you look at last season, you might question a round 2 pickup for Omarion Hampton. But this is where you'd be wrong. Because in 9 games last season when healthy, he had over 79% snap share, where he averaged over 17.5 fantasy points per game, which was RB1 production overall. Per game when healthy, he was top 12 at the position. PFF had him graded as the 8th overall rushing running back. Now here's where your attention should shift, and that's Mike McDaniel being hired as the offensive coordinator, which really caught my eye. The same Mike McDaniel who turned Devon Achane into one of the best fantasy running backs in the past 2 years at Miami. And Hampton's profile with the speed, agility, and vision is identical to Achane's situation. McDaniel didn't go to LA just for the weather, but to make another fantasy running back relevant. The Chargers also upgraded the offensive line this offseason. Tyler Badaz, Cole Strange, and Jake Slaughter are coming in at the interior offensive line, with Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater coming back from injury. This is a complete rehaul of the offensive line, where I could easily see this being a top 10 unit if they stay healthy. Hampton is 21 years old and his second year in the league. Historically, the common breakout year for running backs. The per-game talent is there, the scheme is there, the age is there. The only reason why he's going as an RB11 right now is because they're reading what happened last season. If this was a running back who was drafted in round 1 and got into the situation going into this year as a rookie, we would be drafting Omarion Hampton in the round 1. But in this scenario where he had last year against a bad offensive line, an injury-plagued season, it's a completely different situation going into this next year. Omarion Hampton, in my eyes, could easily finish as a top 5 running back this year, and I'm not joking. He was extremely efficient last year when healthy. If he stays healthy this year, under Mike McDaniel, with that offensive line, he's easily going to be amazing in fantasy. Now, as much as I want to give you guys the underrated picks or the picks that you don't see coming or things that you don't already know, we have to talk about the model and what the statistics back up. Because we're seeing Jeremiah Love fall on most draft boards in a lot of fantasy mock drafts. Jeremiah Love right now is going as the number 14 overall player on ESPN, which has him going in near the early to mid round 2 range. Let's look into it, because Love had a 95.2 PFF grade in college and ran a 4.36. He was the number 3 pick in the NFL draft and went to the Arizona Cardinals. Analysts compared him to Saquon Barkley and Ezekiel Elliott because the physical tools are there. Jeremiah Love is an amazing player, but we have to talk about the situation. Arizona is projected by most analysts to be the worst team in the NFL next year. And we talked about it before. When you're losing, you're not going to run the ball as much. The research on this is clear. Negative game scripts, mainly situations where teams are down by more than 2 scores, directly suppress rushing attempts. So coaches don't hand the ball to the running back when they're down or coming from behind. So you could have the most talented running back in this draft class and the number 3 overall pick, but if you're losing by more than 14 points every single week, he's just not going to get any volume. And that's the number 1 metric for sustained success, is weighted opportunities. Is he going to get those opportunities? Well, he's not going to get those opportunities if they're trailing. There's also the offensive line situation. Arizona's offensive line is just not good enough. The backfield depth chart is also not fully settled. We don't really know yet what's going to happen by the end of training camp. And while we suspect Jeremiah Love is going to get the RB1 role, we don't know what Tyler Algier is going to unfold. We don't know what James Conner is going to do. So here's the bottom line. If this was a dynasty league, yeah, you'd hold on to Jeremiah Love. You'd draft him every day of the week. But we're talking about a redraft here. As the ESPN number 14 overall player, you're paying for Jeremiah Love to most likely be your RB1. We saw what happened with Ashton Jeanty last year. This is arguably a worse situation for a similar caliber running back. I would heavily go against drafting Jeremiah Love this year, and even though most people are starting to catch on, this is a guy you just do not want to have on your fantasy football team, especially if you draft him in round 2. Just to really show you what the model thinks about Jeremiah Love right now is going as the RB7 to RB8 in ESPN right now, which is a round 2 grade. But the model doesn't even have Jeremiah Love as a top 20 running back, meaning the model wouldn't even take Jeremiah Love in front of players like DeAndre Swift or players that are going like Quinshon Judkins or Cam Skattebo. Meaning, a player that you're taking in round 2, the model wouldn't even take Jeremiah Love in round 6 or near round 7 even. That just kind of shows you how bad Jeremiah Love is predicted to do just based off of all the metrics we used from historical standpoints. Now, next up is a guy that fantasy did not like last year, but someone that the model really likes going into this year. And that's Bucky Irving. He is the most undervalued player on the board currently. If there's one player that the entire class got wrong, I think it's Bucky Irving. ESPN has him ranked as the RB21. For a 23-year-old running back who led the entire NFL in missed tackles forced per attempt in 2024 is kind of insane. So let me put this into context. Missed tackles forced per attempt is one of the stickiest efficiency metrics at the running back position year over year, meaning it's a genuine skill that carries over. It's not just like a fluke or anything like that where he had one good efficiency season. It's nothing like that. Irving was the best at the league in it. His 2025 season was cut short due to injury, and he unfortunately only played around 10 games. And that's why he's the RB21. The market is punishing him for the missed games and the injury from last season and what he was doing when he wasn't healthy. It kind of sounds familiar. We just talked about Hampton in the same scenario. So when Irving was on the field in 2025, he was putting up top 15 caliber production when healthy. Remember those first 4 weeks? Bucky Irving was a very good running back. His yards per carry was elite, his receiving work was very good, and Baker Mayfield was a really good passer. Now here's the offseason development. The Buccaneers signed Kenneth Gainwell, and now the fantasy community is having a frenzy. It is now a committee, it's now this, it's a 1A, 1B, but let's look at what Gainwell actually is. He's had 114 carries in 5 NFL seasons. He's never been given an early down role by any coaching staff. He is purely a third down specialist on obvious passing downs and replaced Rashad White's role, not Bucky Irving's. The new offensive coordinator is Zach Robinson, who ran Bijan Robinson's offenses in Atlanta. He came out and explicitly said that Irving is a starring role in this offense. Those were his words, not mine. Irving is 23 years old, entering his peak breakout age, and his elite contact breaking ability. With a confirmed lead role, a pretty good quarterback, and an OC who has publicly committed to featuring Bucky Irving when back from injury. The shoulder surgery is a concern, I'll admit. He wasn't clear for OTAs, and he's not going to be back until around training camp. But the market is pricing him as if he's not a committee back in a very good offense. RB21 is a little insane. He's going at around round 5 area, and you can usually get him as your flex play or sometimes as your RB2. In my opinion, Bucky Irving has so much upside to be a top 10 running back. It's insane. I think he's very undervalued, but the model really likes Bucky Irving, which is a very good sign. Now let's talk about the opposite end of the spectrum, where the model and I do not agree with this player's ranking, and that's Devon Achane. This is just a complete situation collapse, and it has nothing to do with Achane as a player. ESPN has Achane as the RB5, which I get. He led the NFL in yards per carry last year with 5.7 and had 78 targets. He was an absolute weapon. But let me walk you through what happened in this situation, this offense, and this offseason, because it's hard to believe how much it changed. Mike McDaniel, as we said, is gone to the Chargers. Tua Tagovailoa is cut. Tyreek Hill is gone. Jalen Waddle gone. The offense as a whole is completely gone. Malik Willis is now the starting quarterback for the team. Willis has never been a full-time starter in the NFL. His accuracy has been questioned everywhere he has been and had one good game with the Packers that led him to getting a $67.5 million contract this offseason. But here's the thing about Willis that the fantasy market isn't really realizing. He's a mobile quarterback. He runs a lot. That means the goal line touchdowns that used to go to Achane is gone. And Achane was already a small running back whose goal line touchdowns and touches were going down to Ollie Gordon. Pair that with the fact that Malik Willis has the lowest checkdown rate in the entire NFL when starting is just not a recipe for success. The Dolphins went 7-10 last season, and they are rebuilding. That means there's going to be negative game scripts, and trailing teams don't run the ball as much when down. And you might say, this is good, okay? Achane, when down, gets a lot of receptions, and he's going to farm some fantasy points at the end of games. But again, as we stated, Malik Willis doesn't check the ball down at all. So when you usually get teams who are down and they're passing the ball a lot, and you have the running back in the flat or on a curl route just going to try and get those easy checkdowns for those PPR points, Malik Willis isn't going to throw that because he's just going to scramble instead if the defense is going to back off. Achane's physical talent hasn't changed. He's still very good. But the quarterback, the offensive coordinator, and the weapons around him completely changed. You can see in this graph here, we have the ESPN rank compared to the model rank. And we're looking at some names here that we're going to get into possibly later. But when talking about Devon Achane, the model does not agree with the ESPN rank. He is at one of the lowest model to ESPN rank ratios, as you can see, below the line, below the median line. And he's around, as we said, RB5 in ESPN, but the model has him near the RB16 to RB17 range, which is you'd be picking him in around round 3 to 4 there. It's someone you want to look to avoid. And another thing that the model took into account is injury concern. Achane didn't get injured last year, but before that, Achane was kind of injury prone and an injury concern. He has a smaller build, and when he gets hit hard, it takes a toll on his body. Let's not forget that Achane behind a worse offense might be getting hit a little bit more. He took that into account. Again, this is just a lot of why to not take Achane. Now, last but certainly not least, I want to go over our last potential breakout candidate, and that's Ashton Jeanty. Jeanty is one of the clearest breakout candidates that I've personally seen, and that the model mostly predicts to do the same. Here's what we've seen that the research agrees with. The second most common year for a running back to break out is year 2. Rookies deal with the scheme adjustment, workload restrictions, and blocking that isn't what they're used to in college if they're at such elite talent. By year 2, the offense is designed for them, the competition is mostly cleared out, and the coaching staff trusts them. Well, I just said all of that, but Clint Kubiak is coming in as the new head coach and has a new system in mind for Ashton Jeanty. But Jeanty checks off those boxes. He's more used to the NFL now. He's getting a better offensive line, so he's used to the bad blocking, but he's going to have even better blocking next year. And he's 21 years old. He's got that year 2 breakout in him. He's still extremely young and is in that threshold for the breakout running backs. He's also an elite talent. Let's not forget, he was the first running back taken in last year's draft. Ashton Jeanty is an elite talent who definitely has the potential to break out. His college metrics were very elite. He was in the top 90th percentiles and the 100th percentiles for almost every statistic in college. But we're in the NFL now. So let's talk about what he did during his rookie season. His yards per carry as a rookie was 3.7, which was bad, but that number is explained by one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. He was making something out of nothing pretty much every single week. Now you look at what Las Vegas did this offseason, and that was signing Tyler Linderbaum, which is one of the best centers in football, and a very heavy contract, which is just a statement from the organization saying we need to try and get the trenches better so we can have a better run game. Clint Kubiak brings an offense that was from the Seattle Super Bowl winning team from last season. They now get Kirk Cousins and Fernando Mendoza, which both quarterbacks suspect to check the ball down a lot, and a lot more than Geno Smith. Fernando Mendoza as a rookie is going to have to try and get used to the league, and is going to most likely check down the ball down to his running back a lot. They're also probably going to run the ball more with a rookie quarterback. Kirk Cousins is someone who checks the ball down a lot at a very high rate. ESPN has him as the RB6 right now, and our model has him at around a similar range. Personally, though, Ashton Jeanty is one of the clear breakout candidates for next year, and I think he has a very clear case to being an RB1 for this upcoming season. Now, I do want to go over one thing. Ashton Jeanty is predicted to be in a committee or 50-50 split because of what happened in Seattle last year with Kenneth Walker. But I want to kind of debunk those claims real quick. Just because Clint Kubiak did something in Seattle last year doesn't mean he's going to do the same thing this year. The Raiders need to win as many games as possible. If you think that Clint Kubiak is going to give Mike Washington the same amount of carries as Ashton Jeanty, you are out of your mind. Ashton Jeanty has the clear talent gap between all of the players in that running back room. He is going to get majority of carries. And even if it's 70-30, even if it's 65-35, it doesn't matter. Jeanty, with the amount of carries in that specific offense, is going to have production. It's a much better situation from last year. And statistically and on a points per game basis, Ashton Jeanty wasn't actually a terrible running back for fantasy last year. He was still at around a high RB2 range. A completely updated system, new situation, new play calling. Guys, we're looking at an RB1 finish here, and it's very obvious. That wraps up Behind the Box Score Episode 2. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys were able to get something from this video. We saw what the model thought compared to the ESPN rankings and compared them on statistical analysis and all the factors that prove running back success in the future. I think that you guys are going to be able to take away a lot from this, and I'm going to use these models in the future for a lot more position groups. We're looking at quarterbacks and tight ends next, so stay tuned for that video. But so far, I hope you guys learned a lot, and peace out till next time.